Verses 12 to 20. In these verses we have the ship putting to sea again, and pursuing her voyage at first with a promising gale. Observe, 1. What induced them to leave the fair havens? It was because they thought the harbour not commodious to winter in. It was pleasant enough in summer, but in the winter they lay bleak. Or perhaps it was upon some other account incommodious. Provisions perhaps were scarce and dear there, and they ran upon a mischief to avoid an inconvenience, as we often do. Some of the ship's crew, or of the council that was called to advise in this matter, were for staying there, rather than venturing to sea now that the weather was so uncertain. It is better to be safe in an incommodious harbour than to be lost in a tempestuous sea. But they were outvoted when it was put to the question, and the greater part advised to depart thence also, yet they aimed not to go far, but only to another port of the same island, here called Phoenice, and some think it was so called because the Phoenicians frequented it much, the merchants of Tyre and Sidon. It is here described to lie towards the southwest and northwest. Probably the haven was between the two promontories or juttings out of land into the sea, one of which pointed to the northwest and the other to the southwest, by which it was guarded against the east winds. Thus hath the wisdom of the Creator provided for the relief and safety of those who go down to the sea in ships, and do business in great waters. In vain had nature provided for us the waters to sail on, if it had not likewise provided for us natural harbours to take shelter in. 2. What encouragement they had at first to pursue their voyage. They set out with a fair wind, v13, the south wind blew softly, upon which they should gain their point, and so they sailed close by the coast of Crete and were not afraid of running upon the rocks or quicksands, because the wind blew so gently. Those who put to sea with ever so fair a gale know not what storms they may yet meet with, and therefore must not be secure, nor take it for granted that they have obtained their purpose, when so many accidents may happen to cross their purpose. Let not him that girdeth on the harness boast as though he had put it off. 2. The ship in a storm presently, a dreadful storm. They looked at second causes, and took their measures from the favourable hints they gave, and imagined that because the south wind now blew softly it would always blow so. In confidence of this, they ventured to sea, but were soon made sensible of their folly in giving more credit to a smiling wind than to the word of God in Paul's mouth, by which they had fair warning given them of a storm. Observe. 1. What their danger and distress was. 1. There arose against them a tempestuous wind, which was not only contrary to them, and directly in their teeth, so that they could not get forward, but a violent wind, which raised the waves, like that which was sent forth in pursuit of Jonah, though Paul was following God, and going on in his duty, and not as Jonah running away from God and his duty. This wind the sailors called Euroclydon, a northeast wind, which upon those seas perhaps was observed to be in a particular manner troublesome and dangerous. It was a sort of whirlwind, for the ship is said to be caught by it, v15. It was God that commanded this wind to rise, designing to bring glory to himself, and reputation to Paul, out of it, stormy winds being brought out of his treasuries, PS 135:7, they fulfill his word, PS 148:8. 2. The ship was exceedingly tossed, v18, it was kicked like a football from wave to wave, its passengers, as it is elegantly described, PS 107:26, 27, mount up to the heavens, go down again to the depths, reel to and fro, stagger like a drunken man, and are at their wits' end. The ship could not possibly bear up into the wind, could not make her way in opposition to the wind, and therefore they folded up their sails, which in such a storm would endanger them rather than to them any service, and so let the ship drive, not whither it would, but whither it was impelled by the impetuous wave on quo volut, sed quo rapit impetus undi. Ovid. Trist. It is probable that they were very near the haven of Phoenice when this tempest arose, and thought they should presently be in a quiet haven, and were pleasing themselves with the thought of it, and wintering there, and lo, of a sudden, they are in this distress. Let us therefore always rejoice with trembling, and never expect a perfect security, nor a perpetual security, till we come to heaven. 3. they saw neither sun nor stars for many days. This made the tempest the more terrible, that they were all in the dark, and the use of the lodestone for the direction of sailors not being then found out, so that they had no guide at all, when they could see neither sun nor stars, made the case the more hazardous. Thus melancholy sometimes is the condition of the people of God upon a spiritual account. They walk in darkness and have no light. Neither sun nor stars appear, they cannot dwell, nay, they cannot fasten, upon anything comfortable or encouraging, thus it may be with them, and yet light is sown for them. 4. They had abundance of winter weather, no small tempest gemo and alcoholigos, cold rain and snow, and all the rigors of that season of the year, so that they were ready to perish for cold, and all this continued many days. See what hardships those often undergo who are much at sea, besides the hazards of life they run, and yet to get gain there are still those who make nothing of all this, and it is an instance of divine providence that it disposes some to this employment, notwithstanding the difficulties that attend it, for the keeping up of commerce among the nations, and the isles of the Gentiles particularly, and Zebulun can as heartily rejoice in his going out as Issachar in his tents. Perhaps Christ therefore chose ministers from among seafaring men, because they had been used to endure hardness. 2. What means they used for their own relief, they betook themselves to all the poor shifts, for I can call them no better, that sailors in distress have recourse to. 1. When they could not make head against the wind, they let the ship run adrift, finding it was to no purpose to ply either the oar or the sail. When it is fruitless to struggle, it is wisdom to yield. 2. They nevertheless did what they could to avoid the present danger. There was a little island called Clauda, and when they were near that, though they could not pursue their voyage, they took care to prevent their shipwreck, and therefore so ordered their matters that they did not run against the island, but quietly ran under it. v. 16. 3. When they were afraid they should scarcely save the ship, they were busy to save the boat, which they did with much ado. They had much work to come by the boat. v. 16, but at last they took it up. v. 17. This might be of use in any exigence, and therefore they made hard shift to get it into the ship to them. 4. They used means which were proper enough in those times, when the art of navigation was far short of the perfection it is now come to. They undergirded the ship. v. 17. They bound the ship under the bottom of it with strong cables, to keep it from bulging in the extremity of the tempest. 5. For fear of falling into the quicksands they struck sail, and then let the ship go as it would. It is strange how a ship will live at sea, so they express it, even in very stormy weather, if it have but sea room, and, when the sailors cannot make the shore, it is their interest to keep as far off it as they can. 6. The next day they lightened the ship of its cargo, threw the goods and the merchandises overboard, as Jonah's mariners did, ch 1:5, being willing rather to be poor without them than to perish with them. Skin for skin, and all that a man has, will he give for his life. See what the wealth of this world is, how much soever it is courted as a blessing, the time may come when it will be a burden, not only too heavy to be carried safe of itself, but heavy enough to sink him that has it. Riches are often kept by the owners thereof to their hurt, Eccle 5:13, and parted with to their good. But see the folly of the children of this world, they can be thus prodigal of their goods when it is for the saving of their lives, and yet how sparing of them in works of piety and charity, and in suffering for Christ, though they are told by eternal truth itself that those shall be recompensed more than 1,000-fold in the resurrection of the just. Those went upon a principle of faith who took joyfully the spoiling of their goods, knowing in themselves that they had in heaven a better and a more enduring substance. Hebrew 10:34. Any man will rather make shipwreck of his goods than of his life, but many will rather make shipwreck of faith and a good conscience than of their goods. 7. The third day they cast out the tacklings of the ship, the utensils of it, armamenta, so some render it, as if it were a ship of force. With us it is common to heave the guns overboard in the extremity of a storm, but what heavy artillery they had then which it was necessary to lighten the ship of I do not know, and I question whether it was not then a vulgar error among seamen thus to throw everything into the sea, even that which would be of great use in a storm, and no great weight. 3. The despair which at last they were brought to, v20 All hope that we should be saved was then taken away. The storm continued, and they saw no symptoms of its abatement. We have known very blustering weather to continue for some weeks. The means they had used were ineffectual, so that they were at their wits' end, and such was the consternation that this melancholy prospect put them into that they had no heart either to eat or drink. They had provision enough on board, v38, but such bondage were they under, through fear of death, that they could not admit the supports of life. Why did not Paul, by the power of Christ, and in his name, lay this storm? Why did he not say to the winds and waves, "Peace, be still," as his master had done? Surely it was because the apostles wrought miracles for the confirmation of their doctrine, not for the serving of a turn for themselves or their friends.